Okay. One moment.
I'm munching on my peach.
Just going to be a couple seconds.
Are we now live?
It says we're live.
Oh, in that case, yes, you're now live.
Awesome.
Yay! Hello, Internet land.
How do we see if anybody's looking at us? How is there like a little?
I manage that from my
Go
side.
with it.
Okay, so I'm not going to be able to see the discussion.
No.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, that shoots our plans.
Huh.
You got this.
All right. So, hi everybody. Welcome to our little corner of the internet. We're going to talk about balancing your editing. I'm Matthew Daniels. I'm going to be the sort of host, I guess. Hi. Today we're going to talk about obviously the fact that all you need to do is keep writing. You don't really need to edit, and then we're good. So
There we go. That's the whole hour.
yep, it's been good. Have a good one. So yeah, I have here with me today three of our excellent authors. We have and editors, for that matter. We have our editor-in-chief, Erin Vance.
Hi.
Yo. And we also have AJ Ryan
Hello.
and Brad Dunne. Everybody, go team. So I guess we'll get this show on the road. How do we like to talk about our editing? Do you guys have your editing in mind when you start your project? It's an odd question, but
You mean like self-editing? You like your own project?
well, for example, when I was doing my novel, I had a separate file where as I was going, I'd make a little note to myself, research this so that I find out that cars work that way or whatever. And then I just keep going. That's something I'll look at later. And then I just have a giant file of planned problems, basically.
I wish I had that kind of control.
So how does your process go?
Yeah, I definitely would just make notes. I would probably I usually just use track changes for that, and I'll use like a little comment bubble.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like you said, something some scientific thing you want to research, for example, that you don't know, I would just kind of highlight a sentence, create and make a comment and just say like research this later at some point. But otherwise, yeah, like I try to keep the two hats different. My writing hat, my author hat, and my editor hat separate, because if you're trying to juggle the two, I think while you're writing, it just really stifles the creativity of it.
Certainly takes you out of the flow, eh?
Yes. I kind of just wrote my whole thing, and then when I went back many months later to look at it, I went, wait, I can probably look up the exact layout of that university. And that's when I did that on a second draft. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's actually what I do a lot too. I'll put in my comments as I go through the second time. It pops out to me, hey, I didn't talk about that. Or maybe a description of the surroundings would work there. Or yeah, that sort of stuff. Otherwise, hate to admit it, but a lot of the times I will just take that tangent and go for it. And then I haven't written anything all day.
It's satisfying though, isn't it?
I mean, yeah.
They're tempting tangents.
Yeah, it's definitely an excuse to not work on writing that we all fall into.
Oh, there's sororities on this campus? How many? How do you join? Am I ever going to the States? No. Do any of my characters join a sorority? No.
Well, one of the main settings of my most recent book is like this big mansion. And I went on a huge rabbit hole of mansion layouts, and gothic home decor. What's a cupola? Like, trims on windows and all that kind of stuff.
Is that like, I don't know. I find like that's an editor thing. You'll find something you're like, I think I know what that is, but let's go look it up.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Are there different versions? And then you're like, should I ask them about the details of it? And you're like, you know, it doesn't matter.
You're just trying to lie convincingly.
Pretty much.
The next project I want to work on involves a ship. And so before I can start writing it, I have to design the whole ship. So I had to harass my marine architect sister for about a week with like, let's design a ship, Jessica. It'll only take an hour. It took us 4.
Yep, lots of rabbit holes out there, right?
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the experience of editing somebody else's work as opposed to your own.
Much easier.
Yeah.
Well, my work is perfect, obviously, and everything I have in there is important and needs to be there. And there are no like worthless details. Someone else's work, though, that's useless. That's great poorly. That's not how I would do it. Much easier to edit someone else's.
Almost like it's addicting to edit other people's worlds. It makes it so much easier just to ignore your own. Like I would gladly take on 5 projects at once, and then I'll be like, my story will still be there. Just
What I
not
like
on
about editing someone else's work too is I know when I'm done. Whereas I will just noodle and noodle and noodle with my own writing.
Yes.
And it's really hard to know when to walk away. But I don't know, for whatever reason, I just have a better critical distance with someone else's stuff that I can just say, okay, this is fine now. But
I find too with editing someone else's, you can say, I'm going to do a chapter. And then you're okay with stopping. But when you're writing your own, you're like, is this the end of the chapter? I think I need another paragraph. I can't write anything today. Goodbye.
Yeah, if someone sends you a draft, it's a succinct thing. So you like, I can break it up in quarters. I can do it in eighths. I can do this. And then you're working on your own. You're like, I have no idea when it ends.
It never ends. It lives forever in your brain.
Yeah.
Personally, when I'm editing somebody else's work, which has been a new experience for me, I've only started doing that in the last few months. One of the things that tripped me up was that I didn't just stop with stuff like, how does it flow? Is there a good pace? Is the grammar solid? And this sort of thing. I also got into, now I need to do a giant list of imagery and symbolism and how they're treating their thematic development and social commentary. And I had like a whole file with all this stuff, and I'd go through and be like, so what does this character's situation mean for the symbolism of this and this? And I just kind of got lost in my English course kind of mindset of where do you guys take your focus when it comes to those kinds of academic elements of interpretation, like thematic development, as opposed to, say, character, plot, things that are more accessible to your average reader?
I usually look to with Engen, because I do most of my publishing with Engen. I'll talk to Matt, who's the publisher, Matt LeDrew, and I usually sort of say, like, what are you looking for in this editing? Like, do you think this only needs like copy editing, or do you feel like there's some parts of this you'd like me to give a bit more feedback? Usually it's mostly copy editing, and if it's something that I think like really needs to be addressed, that is like really contradicting some kind of interior logic, like a character arc or some kind of motif or something that I feel like the writer has really broken with, then I'll make some more substantial recommendations. But I try to keep it mostly to copy editing. I feel like that's most of what I've come across. editing for Engen. But also just like my own personal philosophy of editing, and I learned a lot of this when I was a tutor at the university. It's you don't want to have what's called like I call it the Procrustean bed. It's like a Hercules thing in Greek myth where this like innkeeper would put people on his name was Procrustes, and he'd put people on a bed, and he would like, if they were too tall, he'd cut their legs off. If they were too short, he'd like stretch them out on the bed. And the idea is like, you don't want to create a Procrustean bed as an editor where you're just imposing your own personal aesthetics on a work. If you're like, well, I don't really like this kind of imagery, but that's just you. Like that's you got to live with that, because the author has their own intended audience and they have their own vibe they're trying to create. So you have to put certain aspects of your editing brain aside and just live with certain things, because they're just not your taste, and that's fine. That was very long-winded, but
no, but I get you, and that's valid, and absolutely you should walk through some of the thinking like that. I like the Procrustean bed analogy, because it is important not to force things into a shape that's clearly not true to its nature or to the author's intention, or whatever the case might be. So yeah, I'm on board for that.
I mostly focus on the plot and characters because that's where you're getting your theme from. So as long as your characters are going through an arc, I've had some instances where at the end I go, they just went through this whole thing and now you're saying they're exactly where they were at the beginning. That doesn't match your theme. And so by focusing on that, you can pick out problems, but I don't think about things like theme when I'm writing, like editing it really. I'm just noticing issues, like especially character issues, because that was not well formulated, but that's what I meant.
No,
But
I'm
it's
with
like
you.
oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
But it's like you notice it little things as you go along, and then you're like, why does that bother me? And you have to sit down and you put it together and like, oh wait, it's theme. That's kind of the thing. Yeah, that's what
Right. It's in the back of the head there somewhere. Something's not lining up here.
yeah, like if you
why is this so
establish
uncomfortable?
if you establish early in the story that your main character is like carrying like a heartbreak over a lost relationship, and now they can't open up, but then the first time they see the love interest, they're like spilling their guts. I mean, that's you kind of broken.
It doesn't fit.
Yeah, you've broken the character arc. Like you're not sticking to what you established. So I mean, that's something I would kind of bring up, for example.
Yep, that's a good way to go about it.
Yeah. I also try to keep track of, like, honestly, I can't remember the question quite right, by the way. But when I look at it, I'm also sticking really close or keeping aware of genre conventions and stuff like that to make sure. So like that's my main question when I get a manuscript or a sample to read. Like, what genre do you think you're writing in? You know, that sort of thing.
Ooh, interesting stuff. So I'm seeing a lot of different angles and strategies to it, and most of the time I'm seeing that we're bringing a certain set of expectations going in. You're not just kind of taking the work as it goes and deciding upon how you want to approach it. You're coming into it with, let's focus on proofreading, or let's focus on genre, or whatever the case might be, which makes a degree of sense. And I'm sure with every case, there's going to be a certain amount of emphasis. Like if you sign on for a certain project, and the person who's asking you to edit this work is specifically concerned about how the book will be received politically, that's going to put a big change on how you approach it as an editor. Maybe. So
No,
that would lead on into the next question of how often do you allow or do you seek guidance and expectation? So when you sit down to a project, do you ask them? I mean, Brad already said this, that he kind of goes in as like, so Matt, what level of approach are you looking for here? So I take it that AJ and Erin kind of have your own way of going about that.
It depends on who I'm editing. So I'm mostly, due to time restraints, editing the anthologies and the Engenverse books. So with the Engenverse books, I have an idea already. I already have my expectations and a list of what we're looking for, because I do that a lot. And that's my main thing. With the anthologies, I'm looking at it from a submissions point of view and then from an editing point of view. And a lot of times with the submissions, I'm looking at going, how much am I going to have to edit this to make it suitable for the anthology? And I'm also, once it's okayed, looking at it with, how do I change this as little as possible? Because with the anthologies, they're short stories. So they're less than 7,500 words. And it's not enough words and time and space for me to alter a huge thing. So you can't really tweak it. It's mostly proofreading with those. And if you do have to make a lot of substantial edits, then it shouldn't be there.
Right. That makes sense.
No, I agree 100%. Yeah. I think it's like a good advice for people who are subbing to these anthologies. Like, you can't expect, I mean, none of these people have time to fix your story. There's a difference between, even at like a novel level, unless you're like, I feel like only the really big names can probably get away with something like that. Like, publishers don't want to deal with some, fixer-upper. When the publishing schedule is just it's flat out. Like, you could probably get Ellen and Matt in here to tell you how much they work. They don't have time to hold your hand and fix your manuscript. Like, unless there's just something like super spectacularly special about it. Like, it should be very close to publishable ready, and copy editing is just a run through. But
I had a couple years ago a manuscript given to me, and I read it, the whole thing, and I went back to them and I said, a third of this is usable. You have to do the whole thing over again. And they had to pay me for editing the whole thing. And then a year and a half later, they had to give it back to me and pay me again. So, I mean, but it was, I don't want to say a waste, because they learned a lot and I learned a lot. But ultimately, I can't rewrite 2/3 of the novel. Then all of a sudden, my book. And I'm not going to tell the story the way you want to tell it, so I'm not going to do that.
Yep, that's fair.
I think too, like one thing I want to add to your point about looking for guidance, I think I'm a big believer in creating a buffer zone between the editor and the author. Like, when I'm working on something, I would rather have Matt, for example, be the mediator between myself and the author, because I think that creates a lot of potential headaches where it's like, well, can I see like the first 5 chapters, and I just want to change this, and then and then you're like, oh my god, like, separate church and state, have a buffer zone to mediate some of these questions, because a lot of, and I understand this, I mean, as an author, and an editor, like, it is your baby, and you feel like, what are they doing to my child, and it's just kind of like, drop your kid off at school and go home, go to work, and then you'll get it back when your day is done.
There's also, though, I mean, I find that's really good when you don't really know the author, but once you have a relationship with the author and you've sat down and talked to them, especially if you're working on a series, then sometimes you can just pitch ideas to the author and be like, hey, is this really what you meant? Because you know the world you're in. So I think that depends on your relationship with the author and how many books you're editing for them. If it's just a standalone, then yes, have a buffer. But if it's a series, you might actually want to talk with the author about their overarching hopes.
Mine's a little different. Like, my approach to it is, like, I agree. It's a lot of the time with Engen, sometimes I do prefer having that buffer of Matt there, or whoever it happens to be. But when it comes to freelance, it's usually you and the author. But I have a contract that I write up, and it's like, you have to start out we need to know on both sides. This is what I, as the editor, am going to do, or I'm offering to do. And do you understand that's all that's getting done, or, you know, where the parameters fit? And then they have to sign to that agreement. So it's a bit of a discussion, but at the same time, I give a sample so that, you know, because I can say, oh, I'll copy edit, but a lot of people don't know what that means, right? What exactly that has to do, or, you know, you ask them a few questions up front. You know, are you worried about, are you fitting into a genre? Did you have problems with previous books that, you know, maybe they weren't selling so well in that section or something like that? What do you think are your problem areas? So that way I can make note of, I'll look out for that. And, you know, maybe within the first quarter of the book, I'll get back to you and say, you know, you're okay, or yeah, that is something maybe we can talk about. Do you want me to explain how that works? You know, or the where was I? Yes, anyway, so then it comes through that, and but they don't necessarily understand the definition of copy edit, structural edit, proofreading. What is, how far or long does that go? So then I'll, you know, I've decided to do samples for people, because when they see it, then they're like, yeah, okay, that's cool for me, or not quite what I'm looking for.
Makes sense. I'm on board for that. So let's go over then some of these terms that people might not necessarily know. We've already touched on copy editing, which I took to mean proofreading. Are we on the same page for that? No. What does copy editing, how does that differ from proofreading?
It also involves sentence structure and flow. You're not going into a really deep thing with like structural analysis or themes or characters really, but if you've got a wonky sentence, like a proofreader would just be like, that's spelled wrong, that grammar thing isn't right, but a copy edit is more, let's rephrase this sentence, shall we? And it will match your story better. So it's the next step up from proofreading, I'd say. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. If you're talking a ladder of stages, proofreading's the bottom guy. Like they
yes.
count, but they're like the most important because they're like your typo catchers. Because they're the last person that also needs to see it. Don't make changes after your proofreader. You just threw away your money. The next guy on the ladder is like your copy editor. And they're the ones that are getting you to change a sentence, phrase it better. That guy was holding a teacup at the beginning of this sentence, but by the end of the paragraph, it's a mug. You know, those sorts of things.
Yeah, little details.
Yeah. Also, if you want to keep going, it's stylistic, line edits, and developmental after that.
Cool.
If you want descriptions, I'm leaving it open if anyone wants to jump in and pick up these definitions.
I feel like process-wise, it's probably better to have the structure stuff before the line editing in terms of how the sausage is made.
Yeah, I mean, if you're writing the book, I would definitely say, like, I've got a freelance client now, and it's, you know, it's early on, and I'm like, I think we should go developmental first. Because, you know, you talk to them, maybe they haven't had this experience. So it's like, let's check the development of the story to make sure it all fits the package. You're not missing one of your major beats or scenes, or, you know, heck, it's a romance and where's the happy ending? You know, those sorts of things. Definitely, if you're going into the process, then it would be the other way around. Like I said, proofreader, the guy that technically does the least amount, but is the last one you want to see in the process.
The difference of, say, polishing the wood as opposed to actually building the chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that follows.
Yeah, you don't want to be painting the walls while you still have to put the walls up.
Not going to work out.
Let's not hang them after we paint them.
I'm on board. So we touched earlier on the idea of submissions editing, which is a very different type of editing. I know Erin has a substantial amount of experience with this. What about you guys, AJ and Brad? Do you have a lot of submissions experience?
I used to. Well, first of all, the first thing I edited was a student journal for my philosophy department at MUN. Cogito. That was fun. And I also used to manage the slush pile for the Walrus magazine as an intern. And slush pile is probably something that maybe a lot of new writers don't know what that means. So basically, a slush pile is just the open submissions inbox, essentially. So if you just want to like pitch unsolicited to a publisher, depending on the publisher, depending on their schedule, they might have it open all the time. They might have open certain times of the year. But people will just unsolicited pitch stuff, and you got to see if it's worth developing into a story or something. And I would say 99% of it gets rejected. But that's how a lot of new writers have to break in. That's how you got to make your bones, because you don't build a relationship with editors and publishers until you have a few things out in the world, and they can sort of say, well, Brad writes about Newfoundland scary stories. We're looking for that, so let's contact him. But if 10 years ago, no one knew who I was, right? So I would have to, go into the slush pile and see what happens.
Yep, and that's a struggle, but it's a real thing. And if you're not going to go with the slush pile route, then there are other routes, but they come with their own things, like finding an agent, which is a discussion we're not going to get into here.
I don't think any of us have agents. I don't have an agent.
No,
I don't.
but frankly,
I'm a secret agent, but I.
Yeah, maybe don't mention that on the internet. You might not be very good at this.
I don't have a lot of experience in the submission editing. Not yet, but I'm getting my chance this year, so very excited.
Yes, that's going to be a fresh and new experience for you. The LGBT collection, I believe, that's coming out.
Yeah, with Quadrangle.
Yeah.
Oh, so you'll be taking submissions for that?
Yes. Also, Sarah Thompson's going to be jumping on that from Engen as well.
Yes. Yeah. So that's I'm sure we'll be hearing more from the two of you on that front in the coming weeks or months.
Yes.
Depending on how that conversation goes. So that's exciting stuff. So leading in from there, I guess, when you were talking about striking the balance between your writing and your editing, there's also, of course, the big writing question of the money dollars. The what actually pays the bills? How do you want to structure
money dollars?
Yes, specifically money dollars, not just any dollars.
Not Monopoly dollars?
I mean,
Canadian Tire dollars.
At least, if that's the level you're writing at.
Until recently, yeah.
That's a thing. So I believe AJ is effectively a full-time editor. So that kind of paves the way for you there for how that discussion.
It still takes some getting used to. I mean, I made the switch earlier this year. COVID just pushed me off the stairs a little. Just made me jump into it faster. So it's been a bit of a learning curve, figuring out, at first I was just gung-ho, let's be an editor, let's establish myself. But you can't be just one thing. And Erin has talked about this in the past, that the editing very easily gets in the way of your own creative pursuit of writing a story and getting it out into the world. So very quickly, your soul kind of is like, no, let's spread out a little. Let's get some of the creative juices going. I mean, it's awesome getting to read all of that, all these different works from all these different people, especially when it's like people you might not even know. So then, because as much as I love working with Engen and hearing all your stuff, I kind of generally have a sense of, what Brad Dunne, like the tone of that's going to be. If Brad Dunne, if you submit a romance, I think I would fall out of my chair next year.
Well, that means I have to write a romance.
And you better send it to me. No. But those sorts of things. So which is also why I ask people when they send me their manuscripts or their samples up front, because I did get some manuscripts from other people in Engen, and I was just like, I assumed, oh, zombies, or oh yeah, this is gonna be like, I don't know, something else along that way, vampires, it's got to be vampires. And then it's like, no, this is the new thing I'm doing. Oh, because I'm like, I'm reading and I haven't found the werewolf yet. There is no werewolf. So it's always a good thing to, you can't fall into the assumption, but you do get a sense of how someone writes, or what are their tripping points, what words do they accidentally put in somewhere, a homonym or whatever. But yeah, it used to be work 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, editing people's books, and then eat, sleep, edit, repeat. But then I was like, I'm never going to get my books anywhere. And it's like, the dream is always editor, author, those sorts of things. So it was time to shift it back to like 5 hours a day. And then, take the rest for writing, or maybe do 2 days editing, 1 day writing, those sorts of things. So it's a work in progress. I haven't got it perfect yet, but it's very easy, especially when editing is money that's going to come up relatively quickly. Being an author, getting a book out there, that is like, you get paid off way in the future.
Yep.
So
You're playing the long game.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely playing the long game, but it's a test of faith in that case.
I think for my brain too, I work on deadlines. So editing has a deadline, writing does not. It's whenever you're finished, unless someone has already said, yes, I'm going to publish that, in which case that only happens when you're well established, which I am not as a writer, so I don't have those. And anyone who is very lucky. But that's why I find writing so difficult, because there is no deadline. So I'm like, oh, I can do this whenever. But I can also take my dogs for a walk right now too, and no one will know. Go take a nap, no one will know. But the editing is
Editing is very hard to say no to, I find. It's and writing, it's so, not only is there no deadline, but there's no, the famous quote, you have to create the marble and sculpt it at the same time. Whereas when you're editing, you're just sculpting. So
Right.
it's just there for you to work on. It's a very straightforward.
The details.
Well, it's not straightforward, but it's certainly a lot more straightforward than staring at the blank page and trying to actually write it. So, and also, like you said, the money aspect of it, if I don't get paid, I'll just go beat up Matt, but you don't know what the publishing a novel is like, throwing a message in a bottle out into the ocean. You just don't know what's going to become of it. And also, it's just fun to edit. You're being paid to read a book, which is fun. You learn a lot about your own writing through editing, and it just feels like such a no-brainer to advance your career.
it is good for getting your name out there. Edited by so and so, and you can do quite a few of those in the same span. Like if it takes you X amount of time to write, say 4 or 5 chapters, you could have a couple of books edited in that time, depending on your reading speed and how quickly you can jam out your word count as a writer. And there's also a certain amount of bleeding that you don't have to do when you're editing. You're taking something out of yourself when you're writing. That's
It's fun to beat someone else up instead of beating yourself up.
I could only finish writing my novel actually when I had someone read what I had written, and then they said, I need the next chapter. What happens next? And then I had someone counting on me. So I had a vague deadline. Oh, she wants that by next month because she's going on vacation. So then I had to finish writing it because someone was counting on me. And that's how it progressed.
That's great. I do that with my girlfriend, actually. I'll show her stuff I'm working on, and she'll just kind of poke at me like, when's the next bit coming?
You need a cheerleader.
Yeah, I've heard about a scenario.
Buddy.
Yeah.
But it's also to get it like out of your editor head. Like you guys were saying before, it's like you get it, you're so aware of what to look for. And then you look at your own and you're like, well, I'm an editor and I do this and I make it great for everyone else. So mine has to be perfect. Right? And you're stuck in that vortex the entire time. So as hard as it is to like push it out of your hands towards someone else, it makes it, I don't know, it's just good to get that fresh eyes on it. Because I've one of my novellas that's coming out later, I thought it was so bad, and I was like, I don't know what's wrong. I can't fit all the thematic stuff in it that needs to be there. And then sent it in, and they were just like, what are you talking about? Like, it's fine.
Yep, that's the getting into the old imposter syndrome situation. I guess as an editor, it's kind of like being a doctor patient. It could be hard that way because you know what they're doing. They order such and such, and you're like, I know what that means.
It's fun too, like knowing you have your fingerprints on something, and like it's very addictive, really. Like this year, I think I edited maybe 4 books that Engen put out while I was trying to write my own novel, and I was just like, I just kept saying yes. And Matt, like, can you do this? And I'm like, yes. I'm like, well, you got your own deadline in June. I'm like, it's fine. Just give her.
Yeah, I do up the editing schedule for Engen as the editor-in-chief, and I'm like, I don't have enough books to edit. And then everyone else goes, Erin, aren't you in school and have a full-time job? And you're supposed to be finishing your novel. I go, but can I do another book, please? Can I edit another one? I want that one. And they're like, no. And I said, but I want to read that one. Can I have that one?
I did Amanda's book. I did Paul's book. And then I did another anthology. And then I was like, okay, that's enough for now. I'm just going to take it easy. And then as soon as Matt was like, can you do Terra Nova too? I was like, yes. I didn't even hesitate. I just completely violated my own boundaries that I had set for myself.
Well, that certainly fits the theme of striking a balance, getting into establishing your boundaries.
So if I say no, I feel like I'm not going to a party. Like, I'm just kind of like, let me in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people struggle with too, though. I mean, I'll walk those dogs. I'll go to this party. No one will know, and then I can just get at it again tomorrow. And then 3 years goes by, and your book's not done.
I've been forcing myself when I finish editing a novel and sending it off to, Engen Books and waiting a week before I ask for the next one. I've been like, no, I'm going to wait. And then I sit there and I wait and I wait. Go. That one that I said I wasn't going to take till next month? Can I have it now? Because, maybe next month Dominion will go on strike and I won't have time to edit. So we should take it now. Just in case.
My
don't have a-
like my personal rule that I do stick by is I don't ask to do like I'll only do it if I'm asked to do it, basically. So if Matt asks me to edit a book, I'll do it, but I don't reach out to him to see if I can take on any projects. And same with my freelance like journalism stuff. I don't pitch stuff anymore to magazines. Like I know a few editors and stuff that will sometimes ask me to write something, but that's the only time I'll take stuff like that on. Otherwise, I only try to stick to my own writing.
So yeah, that helps you keep to your own.
Like I feel like I've reached a spot now where like people will reach out to me to work at a level that I'm happy with.
That's cool.
Job, dude.
I look forward to that.
So, do either of you focus on a kind of brand, for lack of a better word, in terms of, say, being a horror writer or being a travel editor or horror editor and this sort of thing? Or is it more about other aspects?
I think
What-
I should aim for being a good editor.
I mean, one would hope, whatever it is you're choosing to do, that works out well.
Oh, whoops, sorry. I have a dog.
I think what I've kind of worked to do and why like Engen keeps asking me to edit stuff is like I've shown that I can turn stuff around pretty quickly.
Right.
And so if there's like a problem in the schedule and they're like, Brad, we need you to do this in like 2 weeks, like I feel like I can do that. Like I'm pretty reliable in that way. I don't know if someone I don't know necessarily if like I'm a genre specific editor. Like I don't know if it's like, oh well, this is fantasy, so like Brad would be good at editing that. I'm not sure if like that's my strength as an editor. I would say my greatest strength as an editor is to work within tight deadlines.
That's a good thing to have, though, and certainly good to be known for it.
I actually do kind of stick to a brand. So like if you go on my Twitter, I have fiction editor next to mine because I just where I work in fiction genre books all day, the books that I read when I'm off the clock or like when I'm working out or something are generally nonfiction. So it's like I need that divide, I think. Maybe it'll change in the future, but right now, like my fun reads are generally nonfiction. And I don't feel like I have enough experience in how that is constructed. The story of a nonfiction narrative. So I just stick to my own field with fiction. And from there, it's like, if I think I'm a good fit, like I'm generally open to any particular genre, but I have mostly worked in, say, like, I listed as sci-fi because I did a lot of study of that in university, fantasy as well, romance. I also get chosen to do LGBTQ stuff, obviously being in the community as well as, so that kind of like makes me what do they call those now, sensitivity readers.
Right. Yes.
So that if you have that experience, that kind of lends to that view, just to make sure nothing is taken out of context. And so yeah, horror is a new one that I've taken on. Loving that.
Awesome.
Yeah, so and the more that come up, it will probably be a yes or a no, but honestly won't know till I get out there.
I think editing too, you have to pick something that you like to work with because there is decent money to be made in editing, but you're never going to be rich unless you become editor-chief of the New Yorker or something.
Mhm.
But like I used to edit a lot of graduate student stuff privately. I had to give it up because I just hated it so much. Like, I was working on like wind turbines in underground highways in Saudi Arabia, and it's like, what am I reading? Like, I don't have no idea what this is. I was like, I just got to turn this money down because
Wow.
I'm just not enjoying it, and I'd rather just take the long dollar and see where it goes. Although, I mean, if that's your strength, there's a lot of work out there for that, but you know, you have to balance your sanity with it.
Exactly. I mean, editors, believe it or not, or at least the expectation is, they're not yes men or women.
Yes, but
They're not gonna take everything. I was doing up an article on that recently, and honestly, I'm a terrible liar. And I think it's really obvious that if I don't jive with what I'm reading, if I'm really not enjoying it, the editing takes so much longer, and they can almost tell, like, oh, this doesn't seem to, like, we're not a good fit on the project.
Which is important.
Mm.
Yep. Which continues with the whole striking the balance theme we're going for here. I heard
you don't want to turn into like a ghostwriter either.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, ghostwriting works for some people. I don't understand it personally.
No.
But to each their own, I guess. Whatever works. Have either of you had much experience with, I'm going to call it internet releases, such as serials and this sort of thing, the stuff that you get with Patreon writers, and that sort of, yeah, it's an interesting avenue, but I suppose
I don't think I know what you're talking about, actually.
so basically this fits in with someone remarked earlier about how you might only get a chapter at a time and people are looking for more, and that gives you a kind of artificial deadline and that sort of thing. But basically your web serials are stuff like you're on, I don't know, WordPress, or there's one called Royal Road or something like that, and it's you release X number of chapters a week or X number of words a week, and your reader base is basically following along with your writing as you're creating it, which means that you're getting feedback before your story's done.
Oh, so it's kind of like just the internet version of like what Charles Dickens used to do, basically.
Yes, pretty much. And it's an interesting model. It works really well for the Patreon crowd because that's how you keep people subscribing to your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for more material, they subscribe, they get your material, and it's a good system once you get so far. But if neither of you have had any exposure there, then that's kind of a
I could never write like that.
No,
because so much of my stuff is like revising and going back, like rewriting chapter 1 because of stuff you did in chapter 10.
It's intense.
I had to rewrite like the first third of my book after I'd written the last 2/3 because I realized that is a really poor way to introduce that character. They're going to think they're a jerk, or stupid little things like that. Your first impression of the character is not the one I want you to have. So I had to rewrite a whole. And I couldn't do that as a serial person.
Yeah.
I imagine
sorry.
I think if you could do it, your audience would be your like developmental editor almost.
Yeah, you're effectively crowdsourcing your developmental, I guess.
Isn't that why Arthur Conan Doyle kept trying to kill Sherlock Holmes, because he was sick of people like stopping in the street being like, well, what's Sherlock going to do now? And I think Sherlock should solve this crime. And then he was like, I'm going to throw him off a waterfall. Everyone just kept, then he got it worse because then people were like, when you bringing him back? Where'd he go? Like, you got to bring him back.
Really, Arthur Conan Doyle wasn't the type for serial novels. That's what we've learned. He would not do well. He didn't do well.
Matt says we only have 5 minutes left.
Yes, I just noticed that.
Okay, just making sure. I've
Yeah.
actually also been streaming on my other monitor just in case questions did come up. I
Wow.
mentioned that for the people watching, so sorry guys.
Do we have any questions from the rabble? The peanut
Not
gallery?
yet. Although someone said blood metal brother Matt.
Hi, Nick.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Wow.
In my sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, in my experience, actually, I did start out doing serials. I wrote a serial for quite a while. What I actually had done, and maybe this is the editor part of me, like, or maybe just because I'm like an Uber planner, I was like, I had to have a certain amount ready ahead of time. So I couldn't just like finish it, hit enter, submit. And so I would try to get a couple of beta readers to tell me like, you know, there's a loophole and I don't know if I like this character, kind of get their feel for whatever's going on. I also worked with a few folks on Wattpad with their serials, so that kind of helped get my editing business on the move, getting around to quick turnarounds, deadlines. And sort of the same thing with a couple of short story writers right now. There's a thing going on where it's, you know, it's similar to Terra Nova in that it's like one big story, but with chunked up into short stories, or, you know, it's all within this world, but here's like different aspects.
Wild. It's an interesting experience to have. It gives you a lot of insight into the process.
Yeah. And it definitely did, honestly, because especially with Wattpad, where it's younger writers, you start to get a sense of like, okay, planning isn't such a bad idea. But at the same time, I was really impressed with their gumption, because that's really what got me started with the serials. Is like I was kind of poking around there, doing some editing. And I was like, man, these guys just like, they get it out there. They get it done. And so I was like, you know what? I've got these stories in my head. Like, let's just go for it. Of course, the editor in me won out in the end, and I had to stop it. But out there in the netherworld of the internet, there is a serial by Erin.
Cool.
Yeah. Hopefully to come back in paperback in a couple of years.
There you go. I'm on board. Well, guys, it looks like we're getting towards the end there, which is surprising. I mean, like we could have carried this conversation for quite a while yet. There's a lot of ground to cover. So I'm looking forward to having more of these kinds of conversations in the future. But that crept up on us. Any closing remarks that anybody would like to make?
Thanks
What,
for
do you finish your first draft before you try to edit it?
God, I wish.
I highly recommend it.
It's for me, it's one of those things where if you have a bit of a gap, like you're writing, say you get 5 or 6 chapters done, and then a bunch of things come up, and it's a couple of weeks before you get back to your writing for various reasons.
6 months.
I end up going through those 5 or 6 chapters again to kind of refresh, remember where I'm to and how the style is going and pacing and everything. But as a result of that, I'm going through and being like, oh, but that doesn't work. And then I kind of, so then I'm kind of lost for another 2 weeks while I'm polishing the stuff before I get back to where I was. And then I continue. So that could be kind of rough. Have you guys had that kind of experience?
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why my novel
You're
took
in the
5
world.
years.
What'd you
That's
say?
correct.
How long did it take? Sorry, Erin. What did you say?
It took me 5 years. I
5
wrote the
years?
first third in a month, and then I left it for 2 years because I was like, I don't know where I'm going with this. and then
Oh.
I edited it all, and then I got stuck at another third, and which point I brought in my friend.
I love it.
I know.
Thank you
You're
to
here
our,
to kick us off, aren't you?
thank you to our lovely editing team and Matthew Daniels, who starts saying goodbye and then goes into a tangent and then says, "What does everyone else think of that?" to start the conversation again.
Sorry, we're leaving. Bye.
Have a good day. We will definitely do this again in the future. This was really great and really informative. And stick around for the Engies in a few minutes, which is our
Hooray.
weird, not the Dundies at all award for Engine Books.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
Matt Daniels.
Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.